Welcome back to another edition of Faces in the Corsair Crowd. Today I'm joined by Jim Mullins, the Assistant Director of Athletics for Compliance. Jim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Molly. How are you? I'm Jim Mullins. I started working at UMass Dartmouth Athletics in March of 1994. So in March of 2021, I'll be going on my 27th year of service here to the athletic department. So I'm among the more senior folks in the athletic department these days.
Wow, that's impressive. What brought you to UMass Dartmouth?
Well, I was working in the state legislature in Boston. I've been there for about 10 years after I graduated from UMass Amherst in 1981, and a position came open on the campus for an assistant director of news and public information. It was a split position. It was half-time in the university news office, and it was half-time in the athletic department. And I had done some newspaper correspondent work when I first got out of college. I'd also done some sports writing for a couple of the local newspapers. So I had some skills in both areas, and I interviewed for the position. And then around March of 1994, I was offered the position and started at UMass Dartmouth, and I've been there ever since.
Wow. And when did you start in your current role?
When I first started in the athletic department, as I said, it was a part-time position. I was the assistant director of sports information. It was later made full-time around 1996. I was added full-time to the athletic department. And then in 2009, Bob Dowd, who was the past athletic director, who was doing the compliance work on a part-time basis, Bob finally retired in and around January of 2009. And I had worked with Bob quite a bit in the compliance area in his last few years, and was promoted to compliance officer in January of 2009. And then a couple of years later, the position was upgraded to assistant athletic director for compliance. And that's the title that I have right now.
Awesome. What would you say is your day-to-day in your position right now?
Well, day-to-day, it's tracking and monitoring. So every day that we're in athletic competition, there's an eligibility focus that's got to take place. So you need to check every single day to make sure that all of the student athletes are active and eligible. And that's a daily function that's got to take place every single day that there's athletic participation, whether it's practice or whether or not it's competition. So daily checking for eligibility, checking for credits, checking for GPAs. So that's a big part of every day's activity, is to make sure that all the current athletes are eligible. And once you've done that, the next part of this sort of the daily operation is to keep track of all of the rosters with the coaching staff, because virtually every single day, there are changes to one or the other rosters. So it's a matter of keeping rosters current, deciding who's active, who's not, who's eligible, who isn't. So a lot of those functions are things that I do every single day, in addition to sort of tracking all of the daily compliance issues with the NCAA, with the university, with our different conferences that we compete in. So really there's a lot of sort of day-to-day activity that's just a matter of monitoring and keeping track of all of the eligibility functions and all of the NCAA bylaws that apply to practice and competition.
Great. What kind of unique challenges have you faced in the last year, given the circumstances?
It has been unique, and I think that's the understatement of the year, Molly. Since sports were put on the shelf back in March of this year, the NCAA has responded with a series of what they call blanket waivers. In other words, waivers that apply to everybody across the board. And sort of following that blanket process and making sure that you're tracking all of the blanket waivers has been the challenge. So it started in the spring, when the spring student athletes found that their season had been canceled. The NCAA decided that spring athletes would not be charged with a season of participation, and they wouldn't be charged the semester, which is significant because As soon as you participate in a sport on the first day of practice, you're charged with one of your 4 years of participation. And of course, you have 10 full-time semesters to play. So for each one of those spring athletes, I had to go back into my documentation records to make sure that those changes were reflected. So for example, our baseball players, someone who might have used their 3rd year and their 8th semester now isn't charged with the 3rd year. They go back to 2 years. So they have 2 years left to play, not 1. And they would have 7 semesters used instead of 8. So keeping track of all of the changes that resulted from the blanket waivers has been the biggest challenge. And that was in the spring. Then over the course of late summer, when the fall sports were canceled, an initial blanket waiver was put into place that said that students wouldn't be charged for a season or semester if their teams didn't play more than 50% of their games. And then just a few weeks ago, that blanket waiver was updated so that all active and eligible student athletes would not be charged, regardless of how many contests they're able to play in the 2021 year. They wouldn't be charged the season of participation. And if they're eligible in both the fall and the spring, they could get up to 2 additional full-time semesters of participation. So needless to say now, instead of just making changes for a handful of spring sports teams, now what I've done is I've had to go into all of the records for each student athlete and adjust their eligibility time frame based on the blanket waiver. So it's been a little bit of work setting up those monitoring systems to make sure that I have records for how many seasons each student athlete has remaining and how many semesters they have on top of their eligibility. So blanket waivers and COVID-19 have kept compliance officers very, very busy since last March.
I can only imagine. What do you miss most about having all the student athletes on campus?
Well, even though a lot of my work is right here, right in front of the computer, checking on eligibility, I think the thing that I miss most are the games. Watching the end product of all of our work, not just mine, but all of the work of the trainers, strength and conditioning, the administrative staff, all the work we do behind the scenes is all focused on one thing, and that's the student athletes participating in the contest. And I think that's what I miss most. Not only because I love walking out to Cressy Field or to the baseball field or softball to watch our teams play, but because it's a sort of a complete, it's the end result of all of our work. So I think going outside and watching student athletes participate in their sports is really the most fulfilling part of the job, because there's really this village behind the scene of people who are doing things all day long to make sure they're in positions to participate. And then when you walk out on the field and you see them in their blue and gold uniforms actually participating, that's what I really miss. And that's much more, the participation is what I miss. The wins and losses are great, but I will tell you, Molly, is that after many, many years of watching a lot of athletic contests, I think watching students walk out on the field, warm up and get ready is the most rewarding for me. The wins take care of themselves, and the losses always hurt. But when I think of how overwhelming the odds are against a high school student athlete coming into any college program, whether it's NCAA Division I, II, or III, roughly 10% of every high school student in America gets the opportunity to walk onto a college athletic field. So when you look at, for example, a high school baseball team, the starting 9, 9 players and maybe a DH, you've got 10 players. On every baseball team in the country, there may be one student athlete who gets a chance to play in the NCAA. So the odds are really stacked against student athletes from high school playing in college. So when we get student athletes who come to UMass Dartmouth and they're eligible and they've earned their credits and they've registered and they've practiced and they've earned starting roles or they've earned roster spots, and then you finally get to see them walk out onto the field to participate, I think that's what I miss the most, because that's sort of what we do. Our focus is to put student athletes in a position to succeed both academically and athletically. And when you get a chance to see them go out on the field and play, that really is the most rewarding part of the job.
Yeah, there's nothing like that game day atmosphere.
That's right.
What advice would you give to student athletes looking to pursue a career in athletics?
You know, it's funny. I talk to student athletes all the time about their career opportunities and the kinds of things that they're looking for. And if students want to get involved in collegiate athletics, I think one of the most important things is to make a decision in your mind that that is in fact something that you want to spend your time doing. It's not easy, but it is very, very rewarding. So I've always advised people that if there is an area of college athletics that you want to get involved in, if it's coaching, if it's athletic training. I actually talk to students who love athletics about two passions of mine, and that's officiating and compliance. I've been a baseball umpire for the better part of my career. It's one of my side jobs, and I think the rewards of officiating can be, multi faceted for young college athletes, because nobody knows the game better than college athletes. And across the board, in virtually every sport that we compete in, there's a need for future college officials. And so that's one of the things that I've talked to a lot of students about is if you want to stay close to your sport and you really love your sport, and maybe coaching isn't your thing, think about being an official, because there are just so many opportunities out there in so many sports to pursue careers in athletics as an official. The other thing I talk to students about sometimes is our athletic administrative positions. And there's no better way than to work your way into a college athletic department than through an administrative position. Certainly graduate assistantships are a great opportunity to get involved. And then of course, there's always coaching. And we've been very fortunate at UMass Dartmouth to be in a position where we've had several of our former student athletes have gone into coaching, both at the high school and the college level, and they've been very successful. And I think that's probably one of the things that I think is most rewarding, especially for our coaches, is to see their former athletes going into coaching and passing on those lessons, not only of the sport per se, but also, sort of all the other pieces that go into athletics. And I'm talking about time management. I'm talking about studying, dedication to your academics, and creating an atmosphere for students to succeed both on the field and off the field. And so when student athletes go into coaching and you watch them, especially when you've been there as long as I have, and I've seen student athletes when they come in as freshmen, and I've seen them develop and become key contributors to teams, and I've seen them be great athletes, some of them even joining us in the Hall of Fame. And I see them go through that whole period in their life, and then I see them go into coaching or go into athletic participation or go into compliance, and to see them sort of start their career and develop their career. It's something that I've really taken great pleasure in, and I've tried to be a mentor of sorts to let people know that there really are opportunities for them if it's something that they want to pursue.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Jim. I really appreciated getting to know another face in the Corsair crowd.
Molly, it's been a pleasure. It's been great to have you. You've been a great addition to the department, and I wish you well in your just starting out your career.
Thanks. I appreciate that. We'll
All
see
right,
you all
Molly.
next. We'll see you all next time on our next edition of Faces in the Corsair Crowd.